to order at 9:03 or so. But it's because we recorded. All right, Brian, welcome. So as far as the committee is concerned, I think there's Penny. I think I see everyone. Like I said,
Go ahead, shut the door. Thanks.
And Michael Chen will not be on. So those two are not present. And as far as non-committee members on, let's see. Joe Stewart, Kevin Sealing is on right now. Leon, good morning.
Morning.
John, Andrew are here.
No, you got me.
IT. Let's see. Anyone else I'm missing? That's it. Any public comments, Joe?
We have not received any public comments.
Thank you. Meeting minutes. Everyone got a copy?
Yes.
Were there any changes, corrections, amplifications?
I had none.
Motion to
No.
approve? Okay.
Motion to approve.
Passes
No, I
unanimous?
wasn't there, so I'm gonna abstain just because. Okay.
All right, gotcha. Thank you. And what's next? Leon,
Yes.
you're next, right? The presentation on the training facility?
I am. Let me see if I can share screen.
All right.
You need any help?
Nope. Just it's being a little wonky. Hmm. I'm gonna have to jump out. I don't know why it's I'm gonna jump back in a minute. It's making me update before I can share the screen. 1 second. Can everyone see that?
There we go.
All
Yeah,
good.
now it's on. Yep.
So what we're going to talk about today is related to our training, specifically fitness, tactics, use of force, and firearms. And everybody on this committee should appreciate the power that we give our officers related to using force and not using force. And that's why it's so enormously important that we provide the best training available to all our officers to make sure to make the right decisions every single time. And certainly the dynamic in Connecticut has changed dramatically. If you haven't read the police accountability bill, you should. There's enormous change that related to that that's progressively being implemented. And one of the biggest areas is related to use of force, and lots of changes there for good reason. But we need to train our officers effectively and properly related to those changes. And the best way to do that is with our own range here, training facility, and with our virtual training facility, which we're going to talk about in subsequent slides. So here's our agenda. We're going to talk a little bit about the fitness room, the defensive tactics room, our history regarding live fire training. We're going to do a cost benefit analysis, but I'll talk a little bit about the true cost is not training our officers well. That's going to cost us tremendously. So we need to make sure that we do that better than anyone. And I'll talk a little bit about the 10,000 hour rule, which is a rule that says you can become an expert in something the closer you get to 10,000 hours. And we'd like to get to that for all of our officers. And that's why it's critical that we have full access to our own facility in town so we can train our officers at all times of the day and night and provide the most effective training possible. And that's certainly our obligation there, to provide optimum facilities. I think everybody on the committee agrees to that. And that's why you agreed to be part of this committee to make things better. And I think no one disagrees that we want our officers to be experts when they're using force. And that's what we're trying to get to. Certainly our world has changed, school shootings. Everyone says it won't never happen in New Canaan. It certainly could. So we need to prepare our officers well for that. There's been school shootings in Connecticut, we know that. And there's been substantial increase in school shootings in the past decade or so. Certainly substantial changes in Connecticut law have affected us, and we need to train our officers properly related to that. And obviously our mission is to protect and serve the town and the community and the residents. And this is all about officer safety and resident safety to make sure that we're properly serving the people that we're sworn to protect. We'll talk a little bit about the physical training room. I think there's some confusion about the different rooms that Brian has outlined in the prospective renovate as new floor plan. So we'll talk a little bit about that. That's a fitness room. That's one of our fitness rooms. It's kind of an ad hoc room. It's not a proper fitness room. It's a open area that we retrofitted for officer wellness, safety, fitness, aerobic machines, and weights. So that's our fitness room. I think that's a proposed addition at the rear of our building would be the fitness room. And obviously no one on the committee could say that officer wellness, safety, and fitness isn't paramount. So that's a critical item right there. And right now it's functional, but inadequate in a lot of ways. Now we'll talk about the defensive tactics room. That's, once again, I got to give credit to our officers' ingenuity in doing more with less. They got those mats donated from the high school, and they did the work themselves at little cost to the town, because that's one of the deficiencies that we identify in our training is defensive tactics. We use defensive tactics more than any other use of force. So we need to properly train our officers related to that. And that's specifically hands-on arrest and control techniques. When we take people into custody, handcuffing, sometimes people fight properly, how to properly take someone into custody when people are fighting or not being compliant without hurting the person or getting the officer hurt. So that's critical there. We also teach de-escalation. So that's an important aspect there. Verbally talking to someone, de-escalating the situation so they comply. You don't have to use force. That's ultimately our goal. Overall, our department uses very little force, which is a great thing. And certainly that's our goal for the future, is using as little force as possible to control the situation. And obviously risk mitigation and liability protection are critical there, because we need to make sure our officers are well trained. This aligns itself with what we'll talk about going forward related to our live fire facility and our virtual facility. It's all part of the big package of training that's really essential in today's world. We've all seen the headlines related to settlements and police hurting people when they shouldn't, and it resulting in millions of dollars of settlements. And that's not something I ever want to see in our town. So that's why this is so critically important. So our former indoor training facility, we'll talk a little bit about that. That was built in 1989. It was closed roughly in 2004 or 5 due to lead contamination. And as a result of the renovation in our current building in the 3rd floor and the addition of an elevator, the range is now too short for qualification distances. So investing in that doesn't make sense. There's also water infiltration issues, mold, and we've been patiently waiting for a renovation or a new building so that we can put a facility in that properly trains our officers. Talk a little bit about violence. We're not immune to violence in our town. We've seen murders in our town unexpectedly. We've seen things happen in our town we've never seen before. We've seen armed people come onto our town to commit crimes. So we have to prepare our officers well for that. And my opinion is we can never train enough. I've never seen litigation where it was discussed that the officers were training too much. I have seen litigation where it was discussed that officers didn't train enough. And we'll talk about something later called deliberate indifference related to training. And it's a concept that says that you need to train your officers in the environment in which they work and make sure that they're well trained to deal with the situations that they might encounter in your jurisdiction. School violence, we all know about that. That's something that frankly keeps me awake at night sometimes. And I would imagine it keeps us all awake at night. And that's something we need to prepare for, and we have prepared for, but we can only do better with better facilities that adopt best practices. Sandy Hook's only 30 miles away. I suspect if you talk to anyone there, no one there ever expected that tragedy would happen. So certainly we have to be prepared for that. Workplace violence does happen.
Leanne, with your officers, in terms of your training protocols, because I know everyone has like the shifts they have to complete. Is everyone required to do X amount of physical training a week, year, or month? How does that work? I know, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe the state, the firearms training requirement is kind of limited in terms of what is required. But how does it work in New Canaan in terms of you have these facilities? What type of use and need to use them will the officers have or do have?
Yeah, that's a good question. We're going to get to that in a subsequent slide. We'll talk a little bit.
I'll wait. Wait.
It should answer your question once we get there. So prevention, obviously, that's our role too. School resource officers we have in the high school and junior high school, and they intervene in incidents and they de-escalate things, and they do an exceptional job as they serve our town. And then ultimately police training, that's our obligation to make sure that our officers are trained exceptionally well for something that could, but hopefully never does happen. And that's our obligation. So that's our high school, right? And this is something that could happen. And I'd like you to read that and imagine you're a police officer walking into high school, responding to a call about a school shooter. The person's holding a loaded gun, and your heart's in your throat, and you know you have the right to use deadly force, but this is the first time you've confronted someone and had to use it. Certainly, don't we want to have training that is expert level and paramount and the best offered, and to prepare our officer well for making that very critical decision. This is not a situation that happens daily or monthly or even yearly. However, if it happens tomorrow, we need to have our officers thoroughly trained and ready. That's the mission, that's the priority, and there's no compromises regarding that. Is Penny on the call? No?
Yes, I'm
Yes.
on.
Oh, hey Penny, being on Board of Ed, I'm sure that's something in the back of your mind, something violent happening in our schools, and it keeps me up at night. And that's why it's critical for us to make sure that we get our officers trained to handle the incident perfectly. And going back in history, we're trained to do things differently than ever before regarding some kind of violent incident, like at a school or a workplace. Used to be before teams of officers will wait outside and maybe they would go in, maybe they would call for resources. But now it's literally the first officer on scene goes and stops that threat to prevent people from getting hurt. So the officer could go into a violent situation alone. So that's why it's essential for us to keep that training to the best level practices available.
And Leon, as I recall, also, you actually do on-site training in the schools. Is that correct? I mean, I remember seeing it at Saks. I assume you do it at other schools as well, so that the officers are familiar with the architecture of the school, with the layout.
Yep, we've done active threat exercises at the junior high school, the high school, and we do walkthroughs of the other schools to make sure officers are familiar. And it's really a relatively simple but challenging obligation our officers have, which is if you hear of a threat of violence, you respond to a location, you need to go in and find that person that's committing the violence and stop it from happening, whether you're alone or whether you're another officer. So that's why the atmosphere has changed and the protocols have changed. And it's really a tremendous obligation that we give our officers, and we expect a lot of them. So certainly they should expect a lot of us to make sure that we're training them exceptionally well and providing state-of-the-art facilities for that. So this is a New York Times headline, recent, right? October 31st, 40 wrongful death actions, 125 million paid. And if you read that article, you'll see that it's all connected back to bad training, bad tactics. And that's something, it can be trainable. And I'd love to see an analysis about those specific departments that are involved in those bad incidents and about what kind of training they do. And I don't ever want us to be in the headlines about an incident. So that's why I'm pressing so hard for this today, and why it's so critically important. And my opinion is this is the cost of not training officers well. And that's why bad things happen, because you're not preparing your officers well, you're not training them well. And we all know that the closer you get to 10,000 hours, which is an expert level, the probability of you making the right decision in a critical incident is much, much higher. And that's why this is so essential today. So there's a return on investment, and talk a little bit about Amy, that's kind of your question, which I'll talk through in a minute. So left to right.
No, it wasn't. I was just wondering how much, I wasn't questioning whether you needed these training.
Sure.
I'm wondering with your officers' work requirements, how does the training fall in terms of like how often are they used in terms of having separate spaces and stuff?
Yeah. So kind of circling back, the fitness facility is open, anytime officers want to use it. Typically they use it before their shift or after their shift. There's a good portion of officers that use those facilities. As defensive tactics, periodic training occurs there, and officers are obligated to go to that training and engage in those hands-on scenario-based training to make sure that they're well-trained and able to make the right decisions. And as far as firearms training is concerned, although the state requirement is 3 hours a year, I mean, that's wholly inadequate in my opinion. That 3 hours, that makes absolutely no sense. So our goal is to do around 18 hours of training a year. Right now it's challenging to do that given the facilities that we have available. But we could exceed that if we get to the point where we have an on-site facility, which is a must related to live fire. And we're going to go through that in a few slides that'll explain that a little more. So reading left to right, you could see what the cost of that goal would be, roughly $100,000, $110,000 a year. And then column right, it would be roughly $10,000 a year if we're able to do that training in Canaan, because we can do the vast majority of the training on duty, provided instructors available. So the associated costs are related mostly to an instructor being on duty. And then the column right is New Canaan facility potential for no cost, and it's pretty much unlimited. We'll talk about in a minute how Darien requires their officers to train for 1 hour a month, regardless of other training that's going on in the department. And certainly who here wants Darien to beat us? And right now they're beating us in training. So we can't allow that to happen. And there's good reason for that. This is high risk activity, low frequency, but high risk. And we're all aware of risk mitigation, and we all want to mitigate the risk to every possible potential. And, I took a little pause when I was looking through this return on investment, and the real investment is in our officers and in our residents. I just don't think you can put a dollar value on that. And, I was thinking through, there's lots of public safety things that we have to absorb that may not return your investment. I mean, a fire ladder truck is $1 million. How often is it used? Thankfully, rarely in New Canaan due to a fire, but it's a necessity, just like this range is a necessity in town. And I recognize it's a big expense, but the outside of that is if we don't train our officers as well as possible, the risks outweigh the cost. That's my opinion.
So Leanne, the current amount of training per officer, firearm training,
Yes.
hourly, that
Yes.
your officers have been doing since you haven't had the range available. So how many hours do you require, not the state level, but
Yep.
your policy? How much do you guys do right now?
It's 13.
13?
Yes.
Okay. And is this number, the annual cost reflected of 13 hours or 18 hours? That you're
18 hours.
Okay, so this is more than what you're spending now because you would up the number of hours to make it a comparative
That's correct.
analysis. Okay,
Exactly. Right. So that's our goal.
okay.
But Amy, I don't think you quite understand that.
No, I'm just trying to get
All
the
right, but
comparison.
let me
Paul.
finish. Let me finish. When these officers are together and they're serving on the same shift, they would be able to come off their shift and train additionally together. And they've all expressed that interest and all expressed that want and desire to do it. Just like they do the defensive tactics training and just working out together. The camaraderie and the trust that built on something like that is, I don't think you can put a number on that. So.
Yeah, that's a good point, Paul. And, that kind of leads into this next slide, talking about police accountability. And like I said, Connecticut has one of those comprehensive laws related to this that were implemented very quickly. And one of the biggest areas that's changed is related to use of force. And that's why this is perfectly aligned with what we're talking about today. So there's no doubt that inadequate training costs taxpayers millions across the country. And I looked at some recent settlements, and it ranges from hundreds of thousands in Connecticut to millions of dollars in Connecticut. So it's really a potential there that is too much of a risk for us not to train our officers perfectly. So we'll talk a little bit about these bullet points here related to the changes. So de-escalation is critical and required now. You can't use deadly force in certain situations now. So we need to train our officers what's appropriate in that regard. You cannot create a substantial risk to third party. So imagine yourself, you're the officer responding to New Canaan High School and the report of someone there with a gun. Someone there with a gun, and there's someone near them. Are you creating substantial risk to that third party? So you need to make sure that you're well trained enough that you can make that critical decision, which is literally seconds. All of us typically have hours or days to make decisions, but our officers have seconds, milliseconds sometimes. So that's why it's essential to build in this training and make sure that our officers are getting towards that 10,000 hour expert rule. Now they have a duty to intervene and stop something from happening if they believe it's unconstitutional or improper. And the state has now created a state office of inspector general that investigates serious use of force cases. And I think the estimate is that individual will be investigating roughly 24 cases a year. And I would never want to have an investigation in our town related to that unless I was very confident that the use of force was appropriate and objectively reasonable. So that's essential too. And another unknown, which we'll see how it all unfolds, is a state civil rights cause of action modeled after the 1983 federal action. So that's brand new. We don't know how that's going to unfold. We don't know how many cases jurisdictions in Connecticut are going to see. So that's why it's really essential, for no better time than now, to make sure that we have all the facilities in place and all the training in place to train our officers the that they can be. So what's good constitutional and community policing? In my opinion, is it goes to three things: strong policies, which we have. We're one of only 3 nationally accredited agencies in Fairfield County, and we have to adhere to nearly 400 standards. We have strong oversight. On this call, John DeFederico and Andrew Walsh and myself, we try to manage the department very carefully and thoughtfully. So we have strong oversight in that regard. The robust training, we're a little deficient there. We need to get to the best practice standard that we're going to talk about today. And our goal is to mitigate liability, and certainly using force, especially deadly force, is low frequency, high risk. So the better we can train to that standard, the better off we're going to prepare our officers. And reality is the better off they're going to serve the community and make sure that our residents are safe. So now we're going to talk a little bit about training facilities, types, and uses. Currently, we use a state-owned park. It's a public shooting range in Danbury. It hosts private and law enforcement memberships. It's a 50-yard outdoor range. There's annual fees and per-day fees that we have to pay. The challenge is dozens of agencies and organizations compete for range time. Obviously, the weather dictates sometimes when we can do training or when we can't do training there. And also, it can be very challenging for us to get time there. Sometimes we have to book it out a year in advance to make sure that we have the time slot that we need. So that's certainly challenging in that regard. Shortcomings of current, we've been limping along for 14 years since we closed our indoor range, and we've been adjusting as best we can. Certainly there's some risk. Who knows if the termination of the agreement with the private operator in the state's going to occur. There could be lead accumulation or leaching there at that range. Distance of travel is long, it's not ideal. We can only do off-duty training there. Limited hours, dozens of police departments compete for availability, and cancellations due to weather, and nighttime use is constrained. So modern facility types we'll talk a little bit about. My light just shut off, so I gotta wave. It's not working, whatever. Okay, there we go. So traditional static, which I'll show you a picture of. I'm sure it's a visualization that most people have of what a traditional range is. Versus dynamic multi-use, which is our goal in our ask, a strong ask that we need on site. And then 300 degree immersive, which we'll talk a little bit about. So it's designed for live fire ammunition, about 5 yards long, multiple firing lanes. You can drive a car inside, and this is the dynamic multi-use live fire aspect, and designed for simulated ammunition. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And the virtual range is about 25 by 25 inside the department, and it has screens on all sides, and I have a visualization for you so you can understand that. So that's a static range. Everybody thinks about a range, right? You're standing at the firing line, you're shooting, you're qualifying. And the reality is that's what we had in our building, sort of. Because there's no real moving forward of that firing line, and it's no longer a best practice. It's limited use, baseline firearms qualification, and it just doesn't meet the standards of today. So that's inadequate in a lot of different ways.
And Leon, would that be what it's like at the Danbury range, just static like that, the one that you guys train at now? Is that similar?
No, it's sort of an open field. So you can train forward of the firing line. It's more participative in that regard.
Okay, thank you.
But you'll see what the indoor looks like what the new best practice is. That's the new best practice, and that's what we'd like to see on site. So you see there's no real static firing line there. You can move throughout that whole space. Officers can work in teams. They can do dynamic hands-on training, and this is just not for live fire. This is also for exercises where we use simulated ammunition, kind of like paintball, and we can do that inside here. It's a perfect space for that. And one of the things that we really need to refocus on is low light tactics, because 2/3 of the time our officers work in the dark in low light conditions, and this is a perfect space to do that in safely and properly and effectively. So you can see the dramatic difference in this space versus the traditional static firing line. And this is just the best practice of today. And this should accommodate a vehicle as well. This certainly our officers operate in and around vehicles all the time, and we need to expand that training related to use of force and firing from vehicles, around vehicles. And frankly, it's an obligation that we have to our officers and also to our residents to make sure that if the unlikely bad situation happens, that our officers are the most well-trained they can be to deal with it properly and effectively. So
And Chief,
dynamic,
this would allow, sorry, Chief, this would allow for low light training too, because right now we probably have, gosh, we've got low light from about 5 o'clock at night now till 6 o'clock in the morning. So every stop that our officers make today is low light. And with a facility like this, you can have the lights flashing on the car, but then the background lights can be very low too. And it just makes the officers more familiar with that kind of situation than just trying to train in a field that's outdoors.
that's absolutely right. Yeah, we rarely ever, because of constraints related to use, do low light training up in outdoor in Worcester, because there's all kinds of related issues with that. So certainly this new facility would allow for that and expand our low light training. So kind of walk through the dynamic multi-use live fire facility, state mandated firearms qualification. That's check. That's easy to do. Enhanced use for multi-officer movement, scenario training, hands-on use of force, de-escalation, low light scenarios, decision-making under stress. That's critical. And that's something we could do very effectively in our own facility. Vehicle-based scenarios, room clearing and searching, team decision-making. And it would be a multi-use space to fit today's dynamic training needs. That's the critical point there. And there's case law out there that says shoot, don't shoot training diminishes or eliminates an agency's liability. And the important part of that too is we need to train our officers when not to shoot, when not to use force, when it's not appropriate to do that, when it's not legally permissible to do that. And so that's why this is so essential. So the optimum live fire training facility, and I'll talk about Darien a little bit again. They do 1 hour a month, so they're beating us right now. We can't allow that to continue to happen. So that's why this is so essential. Range characteristics, 5 to 8 lanes, geographic location in town, during after shifts, owner privileges, singular group training, big enough for the automobile, handgun and rifle, able to be used 10+ hours a day, low light training, and training is not controlled by the weather. And that's certainly a deficiency, a big deficiency we have now. So we could do the training regardless of the weather conditions. That's really essential. Location comparison here. So outside of New Canaan, wherever that might be, only train after hours. We couldn't do it on shift. 4-hour minimum overtime, long travel times, 40 minutes right now. Never able to train by themselves, limited access and availability, versus a facility in New Canaan during normal shifts, on duty, no travel time, able to train by themselves, and unlimited access. And there's lots of officers that years ago when we had our own facility in the building would come before a shift on their own and train. And that would certainly be a huge benefit to having our own on-site facility. And we'll talk a little bit about the virtual training facility. So that's.
I'm sorry, Leo, one last question. So 5 lanes is big enough to handle a car for training?
I don't know. Brian could probably answer that better. I'm not sure what the size requirement has to be for a vehicle to be used inside the range. I suspect 5 lanes is not adequate, but maybe Brian can answer that.
I think 5 lanes is pretty minimum to, small vehicle. It's 22 feet across. So a vehicle would be able to fit in it, but it would be taking up pretty much the width of the range at 5 lanes. I know
Right.
Stanford's 8 lanes and they don't have any problems with vehicles.
Okay, so maybe 8's the right answer. So this is the use of force virtual training.
Wait, can we stop on that for a second?
Sure.
Because I don't think there's any way we're getting 8 lanes in New
Wait,
Canaan.
whoa. Before we get detailed into how many lanes, let's let the chief finish the presentation, okay? Otherwise, we're gonna get
Okay.
sidetracked on lane discussion, which is way in the weeds deeper in the weeds than we want to be at this moment.
Okay, so I'll continue on. So this is what the virtual training facility would look like inside of our building. It's a 300-degree screen room, pretty much. Run all kinds of scenarios through, immerses the officers, and these are simulated firearms. So they pretty much shoot a laser that gets recorded by the computer. And you could also use your other use of force tools, meaning your taser and or pepper spray, and you can de-escalate situations, and it's very immersive and dynamic in that regard. But it doesn't take the place of live training or live fire training. It's a companion to that. And here's a little bit about that immersive virtual training room: 300 degrees, virtual use of force tools, hundreds of scenarios to test and teach decision making, active threats like in our school or workplace, autism awareness, behavioral health, de-escalation, immersive judgment based on scientific research, and structured debriefing to enhance learning. So we can run officers through scenarios and then talk through a debrief about what was done well and what could be done better. So this is an essential room given today's environment that we're in and the demands that we have on our officers, which are immense.
So Leon, would this be co-housed in the proposed independent firing range building?
It could be. I've seen that, but presently it would be in a room inside of our building. That's how Brian has that design. But it certainly could be, if the space was large enough, it could be in an adjoining room.
And I guess, the proposal renovating the current building, we have space there. So there would be
Yes.
space. And you said, okay, this is, and this is a new training component. It's not something all the police departments have right now. This is a new product, a new approach, a new additional training. We don't have it now, right? And do most police departments have this? Are we deficient in not having this?
Yeah, we're deficient. That's my opinion, and I'll tell you why.
No, versus other departments. Does everybody else have this? And we're behind the times.
There are some agencies in Connecticut that have it, and none in our area that I'm aware of. But that
Does
doesn't mean.
Stanford have it? The new PD that Stanford built for their big police, do they have this?
I don't think so. No. Which in my opinion was a bad decision, given how dynamic this tool is to train our officers. So we do bring in a trailer. I don't know. Some of you probably participated in it. That is a live fire trailer, and you're able to shoot and through computer-based scenarios, but it's live fire. It's not virtual like this is. This is way more immersive, and the technology's gotten to the point now where it's more affordable and just so dynamic that investing in it is just a bad decision, in my opinion. Not investing in it is a bad decision. It's so critical. I mean, it's just enormously helpful for decision making.
And again, if other people are deficient, I really don't care. I care about our deficiencies and solving our problems.
Yep, we need
That's
to.
fair.
We can solve it with this room.
That's right.
And you've used this? I mean, have your officers trained in this? I mean, are people familiar with it, or is it just have you had experience with this?
Yes.
Yeah, sorry. The answer is the trailer that comes in is the early version of what Leon is talking about. And we've had that trailer in every year for the last X number of years.
Right.
This is not unfamiliar to the police department.
Yeah, and to expand on that a little bit, we have sent officers to a facility in New York to train there, and I've actually trained there, and it's not what this would be. It's about half as dynamic, but it's light years above what we're currently doing with the trailer that comes into our lot annually. So we'll talk a little bit about best practices. So deliberate indifference is a legal term, and it can cost jurisdictions millions when they don't effectively train their officers. And the training must reflect the current environment officers face related to moving targets, moving officers, low light conditions, and residential areas. And I think we can all agree that immersive training produces better outcomes. And the more you put an officer in a lifelike scenario, the more likely they're going to make the right decision. And, circling back to the changes in Connecticut laws and the current dynamics in our nation, it's essential for us to train our officers to the highest degree possible related to permissive use of force, and liability mitigation requires officers to be well trained. So I don't think there's any argument about that. And more best practice.
Leon.
Yes.
Leon, this is Penny. So
Penny.
let's say we put in like a facility, for the 361 that you're talking about.
300 degrees, yes.
Right. How many, how often is that used? Like what would be, if it's 18 hours a year for firearms simulation, how often is that type of a room used?
Yeah, my understanding is we'd have to train instructors to operate the equipment. So in theory, we could train at least one officer on every shift to operate the equipment and run officers through scenarios. So that could be trained, that could be used every single day or more.
But what would be this? What would be the standard for how that would be used? I mean, it's like if 18 hours is what's sort of the standard for shooting training. Maybe this is too new and there's no standard. But what type of hours goal would you have for it?
My goal would be at least 24 hours a year, so 2 hours a month for every officer.
And so that would be. Is that overtime for guys? Because it's, you obviously are booked in for your shift, right? So is all this other training, is that part of your shift or would it be beyond? I'm just trying to understand what it would entail for the officers.
That's a great question. In fact, because the facility is in our building, the bulk of the training could be done on duty, provided we have instructors on every shift. So that kind of checks that box there, and it would be little to no cost.
Okay, so people aren't the officers aren't deployed in the field for most of their.
Oh, sure they are, but they can come back to headquarters for an hour, provided we have adequate coverage on the shift, and they could train for an hour or so. Then they could rotate. We've done that pretty effectively. We've done shift-based training while officers are working, and so the potential is just unlimited in that regard.
And who are the instructors, Leon?
The people we choose.
Okay.
Yep.
Offer like a team. So a team lead, of the 47 police officers, you have a couple that are deemed the instructors.
Yes. I mean, the idea would be several. I mean, typically we have firearms and use of force instructors. It may be some combination of them. It may be different officers than them, depending on how we see the training and how the instructor curriculum goes. So it could be virtually anybody that has the skill set to walk through the technology and talk through the debriefing. So it's a lot more versatile than our other training obligations that we have related to firearms. So more best practices, training facility that combines mandated firearms qualification with live scenario-based training is a best practice. And the use of force scenario room further enhances an officer's skills and leads to better decision-making. I think we can all agree that physically fit and well-trained officers equal better outcomes. And we must ensure that our officers have best practice training options that are immersive and are legally sound, especially in today's environment.
Hey, Leon, for the officers, and I get it that you certainly want the best trained and everything. Are your officers required to, it's probably a contract thing, to meet physical fitness standards? They are under the contract. If you say you got to do 2 hours a week, a month in a minimum, is compliance with that required in terms of staying employed? And I'm assuming you have great officers and they all want to do it, but is that meeting these, if you set these additional training standards in place, are they enforceable? Or does a union contract block any of that?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think you talk about a few distinct issues. The first item is physical fitness. And there is a contractual obligation there related to officers who are on special assignments or teams. They have to take our department's physical fitness test, which is pretty well participated in. Those that aren't on special teams or in special assignments, it's voluntary. So that would be a contractually negotiable item if we wanted to mandate that. But the reality is the vast majority of our officers on their own use fitness facilities and keep themselves in good shape. Related, specifically distinct from that is our training, which we're talking about today. And that's we can obligate our officers to attend the training. I think most, if not all, would embrace it. Certainly they want to be safer. They want to make the best decisions. So that's not really an issue at all.
Great.
So a little summary. Yep. Sure.
Well,
Go
I
ahead.
just had, I don't want to interrupt you. But let me know when you have questions.
Okay, I'll just summarize and then we can answer any questions at the end. So we talked about the physical fitness training room. Hopefully that's clear to everybody what the purpose of that is and the intent and why that's so critically important. We talked about the defensive tactics room and how that's distinct and also critically important. Talked a little bit about our live fire history, and then risk management related to training, safety, and liability. My opinion, it far exceeds the cost of a range. So there's really intangible costs here related to why it's so essential to have an on-site facility that trains our officers to the best practices. And we all know the world's changed related to police accountability, wrongful death actions, school shootings. There's more liability and attention than ever before. So certainly, why wouldn't we want to train our officers optimally and the best in the state, if not the nation? And I think Connecticut was rated as third best trained officers in the nation. So I want to be first best trained officers in the state. So why wouldn't we want to achieve that goal? And certainly optimum modern training facilities help us achieve that goal. And we want to continue embracing. And I'd like to have another presentation a year from now or a year and a half from now where I say that our policies, training, and oversight are all best practices and we're exceeding all our standards. And I think we can do that collectively once we embrace this concept and get a training facility on site. Glad to answer any questions.
So, yeah, I mean, I get the need for, wanting the defensive tactics and the live fire training so that our officers have the, best in class training. What sort of seems a little unfortunate is that, every town is siloed for rooms that don't get used, fully. All the time. So if we have 50 officers and 20 hours of training, or I don't know what that comes to, like 900, 1,000 hours a year or something. It would if we had a top-notch defensive tactics training room, would that be something like that Darien would want to use all the time so that we could do a deal with them where our officers could train in Darien? And they could use the defensive tactics to sort of share resources?
I don't think the defensive tactics room would be one that they would want to share. I'm not sure what their facility is there, but that's kind of a low cost room related to that. It's not really expensive. Certainly, I'm very confident that other agencies would want to use our on-site live fire range and our on-site virtual range. There's no doubt about that, virtual training facility. I think there's a lot of need. My concern, frankly, is for the residents of New Canaan and my officers. So I need to provide the best facilities available.
All right.
And put that.
So maybe I haven't followed then. So let me just go over the kinds of rooms that, in best in class we would want. We would want the live fire training, the range. Then there's the physical fitness room. And then I thought the last room was sort of the virtual training room, the defensive tactics one. So there's three, they're just the three, or is there another room I missed understanding?
Yeah, there's actually four. So, walking from the beginning of the presentation, first one is a traditional physical fitness room that has aerobic machines and weights, et cetera. We can all understand that that's a critical item. The next room is a defensive tactics room, which is kind of like a mat room where we can do hands-on arrest control techniques, handcuffing, all that. So that's the second distinct room. The third distinct room is the live fire range training facility that we talked about. that open range concept. And the last one is the virtual training room, which is that 300-degree room. So like I said, that 300-degree room and our live fire range, I believe there's some capacity and there'd be some interest in having other agencies come on board to use our facilities.
All right, so my question, then I made the wrong question. My question was, if we put in an excellent virtual training room, something that Darien does not have, is that something where you think that there could be they would have a right to use it, ours, and we would have a right to use their live fire range? Is that something that we should explore?
That's a good question. And I've explored, we do use it on occasion, their live fire facility, but the reality is there's inherent deficiencies with their facility related to how it's placed in the building and the noise it causes and how it's all designed. And they would not be interested in us using it consistently, merely because of the design and the interior nature of the facility. I think they would be very interested in using our virtual facility, but I don't think that would be a trade per se. I don't see that happening.
Okay.
But if, for example, you offered something to Wilton to say, hey, would you be interested in sharing in our virtual, that I bet Wilton might say something like, yes, who knows, right?
Well, Stuart, I asked that question up at Wilton the other day to the chiefs of Wilton and Ridgefield,
Of the virtual
because
part.
we're further along. Well, we were
the
talking
virtual.
range. No, we were talking the range, and they said absolutely not. We wouldn't come. It's too far. It's too far to come. It's what they said.
But it's closer for everybody than where they're going now. It's just, this is a expensive, big facility that you're proposing, very many lanes if you want to put a car perpendicular in it. And it just seems like this is an asset that will be used not a heck of a lot.
I disagree with that totally. Totally.
Well,
Not true.
well, I'm sorry,
Not true.
people are, if you're talking, I mean, the minimum for the state is 3, maybe it's 18 that we want to put in. And it seems like there's, obviously everybody would like it in their backyard, right? Now, mind you, I don't even think we're talking about how it's going to be received in town to have a freestanding fire range right in the middle of town. I think people may have issues with that, so a location that's less in the middle of a very busy part of town may be better received, but it's always better to be able to walk out your door to something, right? But there sometimes can be some, can we balance this, balance the cost, balance the use, try to get some sort of, and I know there's been discussions, was it the Wilton discussions are, I mean, can we come to some kind of collective, get people what they need, but get these facilities so they're better used? Because, it's a lot of, and I understand people's concern about doing the best training you can. I certainly get that, but it seems like we should see if we can do it in a higher use wage with multiple groups sharing the cost of it. And maybe people have to travel a little bit,
Well,
Amy, the Wilton.
Let me just get everyone on the same page as far as discussions between different communities. As Kevin alluded to at the last all committee meeting, yes, there are discussions with Wilton. Wilton has some land up at their waste facility at the northern part of their town. They have 75 acres up there, and they're contemplating putting in a live fire range indoor up there. They're testing the waters to see if other communities would want to participate in that with them. And so Ridgefield, Wilton, and New Canaan have certainly had, that discussion. How that goes, obviously remains to be seen. It's fair to say that the police departments would like to share a range if it was in their community and the others came to them. And I would say that was sort of a unanimous feeling of the police departments as far as the elected officials are concerned. And also there was a regionalization person there from the state. everyone wants to look at, cutting costs to the taxpayer for if we can combine services, if you will, whether the range is one of them or not, obviously remains to be seen. But that's really all anyone knows about a potential multi-town indoor shooting range.
Well, again, Bill, they said they wouldn't come down to our range. They said it was too far away. So if it's too far away to come to us, why wouldn't it be the same? It's 45 minutes to go to that area for us. And you can't just take people off a shift, middle of a shift, and go up there and train. And it's a facility that we wouldn't have any control over. None. They could get somebody, some citizen in Wilton say, we don't like guns, and shut the whole thing down. We don't know.
Yeah.
We don't know. I'd rather have our control of our own destiny and build it here on either attach it to our current facility or build it into a new facility that we do. It doesn't necessarily have to be a freestanding facility in the center of town. It can be part of the original building, the old building that we have right now, and blown out the back. I mean, there are other designs that could be considered here, which I'd like to go through at some other point, though.
Yeah.
Are there other locations in town for,
No,
well, pardon me?
no.
Yeah, we're
Amy, you can't
100% there's no other location, because I do think it's in the center of town. It's
I think that's a fair question, Amy, and I think people, we have no idea how the discussion will go. First off, we're to do with for a police station overall, and eventually we have to get back to that, because we do have a vote on the agenda for that. And but as far as the actual training center / firing range, there's if the town decides to refurbish the existing building, we have a very viable and good design for a range at the back. We could maybe even move it closer to the building if need be, based on but obviously we would defer to the architect there. Another option would be a shared facility with another community. You have to have that out there as a possibility. And a third option could be to find another space in town for just a standalone shooting range that's not in the center of town. You have to throw that out there as a possibility as well. I don't think our committee is in a position to vote on anything like that or to discuss it, but I think it's fair to put those three options out there, and they'll certainly be discussed in the joint meeting on Monday. How can it not eventually, that discussion with all the town bodies, get to where to put a firing range as well? Is that fair to everybody? Does that make sense?
Hey, Bill, let me just make a comment. We've been discussing if we build a new building elsewhere that we would not have the pistol range part of the new building. So, and we have looked at the idea of the leaf pile has property closer to the Barrett Parkway that probably could accommodate this. So we have to have that discussion.
But these are all just, potential discussions based on what the town bodies are going to decide to do at the police station first.
Kevin, were you referring to a room at the leaf pile for just of our firing range, or for?
Well, it's one of the possible locations for a new building, but unlikely because we don't want to give up the leaf pile entirely. Right. And on the other hand, there is room there for a pistol training facility.
Okay, that I just was making sure I understood what you said.
And with 8 lanes and so I think that's something we have to discuss.
Yeah.
So I have a question for Brian with respect to the live fire range. We've talked about how you can we can soundproof it, so it's not an issue. Wherever it would be in town, we could soundproof it enough that people would not be disturbed by that. What about all the sort of the lead dust or the contaminants that are created by having? I've gotten questions about that. The contaminants that are created by having a firing range. How are those dealt with, and how could we, if we have such a facility in New Canaan, how could we assure residents that there would be no lead dust or any other contaminants that would escape into the air, into residential areas or just in New Canaan, into parks?
We all do that through mechanical filtering. All of the air is HEPA filtered and it's mechanically controlled. So the air is free of any lead. The cartridges and the filters obviously have maintenance to them, and they're not cheap, so they have to be purchased and replaced. But that's done on a regular maintenance schedule to make sure those filters are changed. And there's also meters that indicate when those filters are requiring to be changed. So you have not just a schedule, but you have a signal on the mechanical systems that tell you they're needing to be changed.
Okay, so we could, if we went forward with this, we could do a good safety presentation that would show that this has been done before and there's no leakage or whatever.
Yes, yes.
I think it's very fair to say that when the town bodies discuss what to do at the police station, the range is a conversation that is part of that overall discussion. And all these questions are going to come up relative to the safety. And as the committee, the quote unquote, the town experts on this, we should have answers. I don't know if we'll get into that kind of detail Monday night, but I think some questions will come up about it. And certainly going forward, as the town decides, where to put a firing range, if to build one, then we should be available to help answer those questions with the help of Brian and other experts in the field.
Can I ask Brian just one more question, Bill, on this? Brian, because I know people have mentioned like the Darien, it's a problem with the noise from the attached range.
Mhm.
Is it, all things being equal, for police, would it be better from the use of the main building to have the range detached so that you don't have the noise issues? And I'm saying that with absolutely no preference. I'm just curious because I know they had mentioned it, and I think I've heard for other police departments, it could be a problem, the noise, if it's, the basement or attached to an existing building that is used for other purposes.
Because of the noise and the reverberation, we are now looking to put these ranges in areas that aren't disturbing the rest of the facility. So if you look at our solution in Bethel, it's not within the department, it's attached to the department.
Got it.
So
Thank you.
they don't have that reverberation. For New Canaan, I think anything within the facility is going to be a nuisance, but I know for Darien, it's an understood nuisance. I don't think for Darien, they had another solution than what they did. But I think what the chief was referring to, I don't think they want to increase the use because it is an understood nuisance. And we had to be concerned about what's around it. And below it is just vehicle maintenance. So that's not a concern what's below it. What's beside it is some patrol areas like report writing. There's a break room. There's some office spaces that abut the range on the upper floor. So they understand it, but there is a noise concern and they probably don't want to increase the use because of it.
Mhm. Thank you.
Let me
Look,
just
it works
say,
for Darien, right? I mean,
Right.
it was a good
It
solution
works
for
for them.
Darien.
I'm also assuming here, as it is Veterans Day, that many of you will want to be 11 o'clock at the available to commemorate Veterans Day at 11 o'clock. Is that fair, Leon?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so I think we should move on a little bit here with some of this discussion and go through a potential presentation we'll make on Monday night and also take a vote on the sense of what our committee has been charged with, which is just relative to our current location. Though I see on our agenda at 164 South, I'm wondering how surprised those people will be to realize that they're going to have their. I mean, that's something to wake up to in the morning, I guess. But obviously, we'll change the agenda to 174. Any other comments? By the way, Leon, thank you very much for this wonderful presentation. Very, very helpful to give us a sense of what the kind of the modern police force.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Brian, thank you. Go ahead.
Well, I thought that presentation was pretty compelling. I just didn't do you want me to show you how we've solved those 4 separate solutions within our plan? I don't think it'll take much time, but I just want to make sure everybody's aware of we are providing for all those 4 separate spaces within our design and how it's being accommodated.
But why don't we pull that to the end, Brian?
That's fine, but I can do that if you're wanting to see it.
Thank you. Thank you. So we'll, right now we'll go on to the fifth thing on the agenda, discussion and vote on the site options to renovate as new or rebuild in place at 174. And just so everyone's aware, Paul Tolley had to leave at 10 o'clock, but he did give me his proxy to vote. And so I will vote myself, and I'll also vote Paul's proxy as well, if everyone is okay with that. When the time comes. On the Monday presentation to the overall town bodies, I think Brian will be there to answer questions. He's not going to do his presentation that he gave last time, but Jim Bell is asked to be able to present the slides that I forwarded to you last night. A presentation to give a sense of the building committee, and it's also important to know that when we take the vote, it will not likely be unanimous, and that on Monday night the town bodies understand that good thoughtful people have looked at this, and there's a couple ways that we could go, and that's all appropriate. So we can discuss Jim's presentation first, or we could vote first, and that may help illuminate what we want to say on Monday night when we're asked to talk to the town bodies. Like I said, we're probably going to be answering questions and maybe 45 minutes of discussion with the town bodies. The other group that's looking at other locations will also be talking to the town bodies, and then I think the town bodies will be discussing amongst themselves, and we'll be around to answer any questions they may have as they discuss the town's best path moving forward. Right now, do you want to just take a vote on the sense of the building committee and what we can do?
Well, why don't we go really briefly through Jim's
Right.
presentation, because I think that's a good, we got it ahead of time. It's a good summary of the costs and everything, and then maybe
I think that's very fair. Yeah, I think that's very fair, Penny. Why don't we can do that? Let's do that.
And then the only other thing that I was wondering, we have at least four new members of the town council who never saw Brian's presentation. And I just wonder, we don't have to decide that today, but for them to be sort of informed, we might want to figure out a time, when Brian could go through that briefly, with them.
Mm-hmm. Or if not, Brian, one of us could go through it with them as well, just to give them a sense to help get them up to speed. Certainly, it's going to be made available to them, but we'll give them a little time to actually sit down and read it.
Hey, Penny, could
Yeah.
I suggest that the new members look at the prior videos of these meetings, so that, and then if they want to.
Oh, perfect. That's what they should do. That'd be great. All right.
So Jim, do you want to go ahead? Jim, do you want to go through?
Joe, would you clear me for screen sharing?
Joe.
I apologize, I'm not the co-host. I think Brian Hims, you were made a co-host, and then Leon, either one of. Thank you.
Is that working?
There you go. Yep. Got it, Jim.
Okay, everybody see it?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I don't think we need to discuss or debate this point, since everybody here has pretty much agreed on these. There's no dispute about the police needing updated, safe, secure, and code compliant facilities. So I'm just going to talk about the 174 South Avenue site. It is a well-established public safety site. It has been since 1980. The neighbors are accustomed to it.
Hey,
You may or may
excuse me,
not
Jim.
remember-
Excuse me, Jim, could you just change the page? Just pull the page up. There it is. One more.
I'm talking about current site 174. I see it. Can you see it?
I see your second page. I think you're on the third page is what you're addressing.
That's what I'm showing it. Everybody else see it? A slide titled current site 174 South Avenue is a public safety site.
Nope.
Yes.
I
yes,
can see that.
I can see that.
Well,
It's
that's-
the findings.
No, you must be.
There it is. Now I got it.
Okay,
Maybe
okay.
it's a little slow over here on
Okay.
my house.
This has
Thanks,
been a
Jim. Sorry.
public safety site since 1980. Originally EMS worked out of the basement of Town Hall, as did the police department. And then after a while, EMS in 76, when it was formed, was given what was the original school auto shop as an EMS building. And that worked for a while. And then 2007, a new EMS facility was constructed on the site. And it was built in conjunction with the current police building. As we all know, it's close to the center of town. The police and EMS respond to medical emergencies. Sometimes, many times the police are out on the road already. Many times they're not. The police and EMS work together. They share a few medical facilities and so on. The one key thing, which has happened to a member of the one of our current boards, is that when the EMS people are away on a call, there's nobody living full time in the EMS building. So people go over to the dispatch center in the police building, and then they can summon the backup EMS crew. We can mount up to 3 crews simultaneously, and then we have further backup for a 4th crew or more from Norwalk. So having somebody on the site that can actually make a radio call is useful and important.
But just a clarification, Jim, in that instance, if it's an emergency, they'd be dialing 911 and reach.
No,
that's no
people
matter
actually
what, wouldn't
drive. People actually drive up, Stuart. It's happened
You're
several times.
they drive up with emergencies and attempt to get into the EMS building?
That has happened several times. Yes, that was. I can tell you more about that later, but that has happened multiple times. So anyway, it is a public safety site. There are many shared attributes between on the site, many of which could be modified, but some which would be very hard to modify. One is just the shared parking aspect. In addition to the on-duty crews, there's only EMS parking for 2 or 3 or 4 people, and EMS holds commission meetings, board meetings, does their required training, which is required by to maintain certification, which is required. They also run classes for to train people and get them licensed as EMTs. So there is considerable shared parking on the site currently. 911 lines currently run through the police. That could be changed. Heat does come from the boilers in the EMS in the police building. That could be changed also. The EMS radio equipment is in the radio room in the upper floor in the attic of the police building. Both facilities share the same generator for emergency backup, and the sewer lines go through the police building. And probably equally more important than any others is the ambulance ingress and egress is shared with the police department. Ingress is in the entrance near the schoolhouse apartments, and egress is one-way egress between the EMS and police buildings. It's shared by both EMS and police. So just to be clear, it is a very well-running, effective public safety site at present. Any questions about that?
Nope.
Okay. The original building was built in 1920. Pardon?
I was just gonna say, the radio equipment can be located anywhere. It doesn't have to be in that building, but go ahead.
I said many of these things could be remedied.
Yeah.
The basic structure is in excellent condition. This is an observation. As I was there when the renovation was done in 2007, the amount of steel and brick and concrete in the current building is impressive. because in 1928, they didn't have computers to convert, to run safety margins down closer. So I think they just were much more conservative. And it's a very well-built building. It was previously renovated twice, in 1980 when it was converted from a school to a police department, and in 2007 when the upper floor was outfitted to become the temporary town hall during the reconstruction of town hall. The building fits the profile for renovate as new. The plan as put forth previously by Brian as a small addition on the lower level, which is a standalone addition for physical fitness training, which meets one of Leon's requirements. The renovate as new proposal would leave the current facade on the building, but replace the windows to something that's more appropriate for the design, and also incidentally would also be hurricane proof as required by the building codes. The current structure would meet the requirement as a code requirement as a quote essential facility, unquote. Okay, what does renovate as new mean? It means basically that you should look at it as having a new building when it's completed. New electrical, new plumbing, things in the electrical are not there now. Improved CCTV access control also for the site, new HVAC, better windows, and basically what things you would like to think you get in a new building. And it should have the life expectancy equivalent of a new building. Now, there are mechanical systems that don't, if you say the building should last 50 years, there are mechanical systems that are going to be replaced in 5, 10, and 20 years. And probably a roof and other things, but that's a normal part of any building. It's not particularly tied to renovating as new. Okay, as you all know, Brian was engaged to help figure out what it would cost to do either a renovation or a build as new on the site. Just by way of background, is he did the PD renovation design and oversaw the construction of that in 2007, and also designed and oversaw the construction of the EMS building. And we covered the fact that what was done in 2007 to the radio room, a new boiler was installed, an elevator was installed. There had been an elevator shaft constructed in 1980, but there was no elevator installed then. So a new elevator was installed in 2007. There had been a previous department needs study, and Brian was engaged in 2018 to update that, and it has become the basis for the work on both the renovate plan and a new building plan. The building committee did consider building a new building on the site, not with detailed design, but just with to meet the general requirements. And I think you've seen this presentation previously, but the cost range, depending on what things you chose, between $10 to $15 million more. There was no detailed design of any sort, no schematic design or anything done on the new building, but it was professionally cost estimated, and if you've seen those numbers before, and I'll come back to that in a little bit later. Indoor firearms training. Leon did an excellent job of describing the need and so on. This committee is not involved in whether we should share something with Wilton, Bridgefield, or build alone, but we do have a good design proposal by Brian for a 5-lane facility on the site. From the upper side, it would be 50% below grade. It's in land that's not currently being used between the two parking lots. It would have good acoustic and safety, that should be isolation, and it would be, we think it would be safe and unobtrusive. That doesn't mean somebody wouldn't complain if we move forward on that, but I think it's a very good design. It probably wouldn't, as was mentioned a few minutes ago, would not allow for a car to be brought in perpendicularly, or So I don't know what the feasibility is of making a 6 or 7 lane site, but the one that's designed and costed is a 5-lane site. And it would be an excellent on-site training facility within that those caveats. Okay, you've all been involved, I think, in hearing various reports to this committee. Structure sound, masonry is sound, but needs sealing and treatment. The water issues in the front, as it turns out, and many of us didn't know this until this investigation. There were windows along the lower level in the front, and in 1980, for whatever reason, they bricked in the windows and backfilled it with dirt, and that is the cause of believed to be the major and the only cause of the water on the front wall in the lower level. So Brian has proposed a solution to pull that back, clean it up, start over, reseal, and put in a drain system that would keep the water from infiltrating there. So that was not a problem of the building. It was a problem caused by faulty design and faulty work in 1980, and believe that can be totally mitigated. As you
Jim,
know,
Jim, we're really, and Brian, we're really confident that that can work, right? I mean, because I know the water issue's been a real problem for the PD, but we're like, I want to say 100% that this remediation makes that lower level completely usable without any water issues.
Brian, you want to comment on that?
1000%.
Okay, that's good. That's good.
We have a picture, Brian, we have a picture showing the police building when the lower level had windows in the front.
Yeah.
And there was a stairway up to what is now the middle level.
Yeah, no, it's cool.
Right.
But
So,
we can't do that because we lose parking and access.
and we don't need to do that. It's not required to do that to
Yeah.
fix this problem.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, also, as I mentioned, an ADA compliant elevator was installed in 2007, and we actually had controls on the elevator so that when the town hall was in the upper floor, people could come in and go to the upper floor to the town hall, but they couldn't access the rest of the police department. Not advocating that, but the elevator can be controlled. Access to the elevator can be controlled. All right. The place where we are right now, this building committee with the work.
Jim, just a quick question for Brian. With the elevator installed in 2007, if we're looking at like a renovated new standard, how long do elevators typically last? They're pretty long, aren't they?
Yeah, they have a long life expectancy. There's a lot of asset there that you can maintain.
Okay, so where this work is now, it's about at the phase that if the go-ahead were given, and for the amount of money just for the construction documents, which probably is let's say it's in the $900 to $1 million range, minus what we have right now, which I think is about 350. So an additional 600,000 or 700,000 would probably be required. We could start the construction documents and move on and all the way through to the bid. And at which point the total cost would be then we'd have bids, which could be brought to the Board of Finance and the Town Council for authorization of the full cost of the renovation. All right.
So can I just,
Hey, Jim, just back on that other page, the
Yes.
boilers were recently converted. As I understand it, we need a new boiler at about a $60,000 cost, just so the committee understands that.
I can't speak to the $60,000 cost, but one of the boilers was replaced in 2007, and I don't know what the life is on the other one. So,
Yeah, it's been one of them has been breaking down regularly.
okay,
And
60,000
just so the
sounds high to me, but that's not, it's not a showstopper either way.
No, it's just an additional cost that the committee should just be aware of that we're going to have to incur, whether we do one way or the other. Okay, thanks.
That would not surprise me.
Yep,
one other quick
thanks.
question. Brian, when you did your needs assessment back in 2018, as I recall, you met with every department within the police department. Did you meet with every department within the police department when you updated your needs assessment within the last 6 or 8 months or not?
Not within the last 6 to 8 months, no.
Okay. So at what point, before we get into a construction document concept, we need to have the architect sit down and go through a needs assessment and update it and clarify what the department is requesting, just so we're clear on that as well.
Yeah, that would be part of basic services.
Right. Good point, Stu.
Yeah, no, I thought, that could be, could and should be started immediately.
Hey, with the elevator, because it's 2007, has the ADA, have there been changes in what's considered ADA compliant? Is that a risk? That is
There's been no changes in that.
in 14 years on when elevator needs. Okay, good.
Okay, this is an extraction of the work that Brian's previously presented, just for a summary, just to make the comparison really relatively straightforward. And the renovate as new proposal, we added contingencies, soft cost and owner's contingencies in two ranges, 30% on the low and 45% on the high. And when you apply to that, and by the way, this is minus the range, and the reason that we took it out, I'll show it to you, is because of the discussion that's going on with the other towns. It can be put back in, as you'll see with the numbers right in the middle. We have two ways to approaching this. With occupied, the project takes about 18 months, and only the detective bureau really needs to leave the facility during that time. And that cost ranges from 11 million to 13 million. If we vacate the building, the cost goes up by the need to find totally alternate places for everything. Dispatch, detention, records, patrol, all the activities. And that raises the cost to about 13 to 14.5 million. The range, as Leon showed in his previous chart, was 3.7, I believe. And when we add the same contingency factors, the 30 to 45%, that becomes about a $3 to $3.4 million add-on, and can be, so either the vacant plan or the occupied plan can be increased by that range to come to a total project cost.
I'm sorry, so you were saying when Brian presented the range cost before, there was no contingency?
No, he put in the overall contingency, but when Leon put on his chart a while ago, it was 2.3. That number was the hard cost before soft cost and owner contingency.
Sorry, so Brian did not include a contingency on the range.
No, he did include a contingency because he included that in the base cost in his original work.
So why are you adding more contingency to this?
I'm not adding more contingency to it, Stuart. The hard cost was 2.3 million with no contingency. I only added the same contingency that was added to the rest of the building.
I see. So you took that range contingency out of the building estimate and added it to the range estimate.
Yes.
Okay.
The new building, and you've seen this presentation, and it was, by the time you go through the demolition and start over and build a new building at about 18 million, add contingencies, comes up to the 26 to 29 million dollar range. So it's so much more. The committee is certainly not recommending that approach. So then what could be done is, with the town approval, we could proceed with a renovated new proposal. We can include the range or not, depending as the town chooses. As pointed out earlier, the schematic design is largely done. It needs an update by department, which could be done relatively quickly and should be done. And then that would be part of getting ready to start the construction documents. It could be out to bid in 6 months from go, and with a construction start in as soon as 8 months. Those have some variation, of course, because there's many things that you can't see in the future. But if you started in January, or be looking at ready to get bids out in the June timeframe, and construction maybe starting in August. It depends on lots of things, but it's not possible to get a new facility for the police in any faster scheme under any way that I can conceive of. The committee would recommend hiring and would, the building committee is given the normal control of the project, would hire a construction manager and the owner's rep to make sure that we stay on track and within budget and get a good outcome. We did this similarly when we did the Sachs Middle School recently, and it was an outstanding success. As you well know, we brought that in well under budget. So that would be the proposal on the table, and could be started as soon as the town could make a decision. Any
So
questions or
Jim,
discussion?
the only thing I'd say based on our discussion today, if we were going to take this and maybe get a percentage from Brian or something, I think we should say that the schematic design is like 90% or something done and ready to start construction documents quickly, you know, based upon that last check.
Sure.
But whatever, Brian, you could give us, that's a nit, but I just think that we'd want to build that in.
Sounds fine to me.
Right. So part of the purpose of this is so that when we do talk to the town bodies, they have a sense of the sense of the building committee. By the way, it will not be unanimous, but it's a sense of what you know, what we vote on to give the town bodies a little more insight into what, you know, some of the core beliefs of the building committee are, in addition to what, by taking what Brian's you know, work and our interpretation of it as far as the town is concerned. Are there any things, if this is presented to the town bodies on Monday, is there anything in here that people find controversial or not worthy to present to the town bodies?
Oh, hey, Bill, the one question I have is, are you proposing we take a vote on the whole plan, like the renovation of the building, as well as the potential firing range, or is that two different votes?
No, I would say that should be two votes, and I've been thinking about this. I think, you know, well, we could do it. Well, here's the one thing. So I wrote down some a concept to vote on. So listen, I would say it is the sense of the building committee that the refurbished new option of the existing police station offers an excellent and optimal solution in providing a new home for the police department. That doesn't mention a firing range or anything like that. If we take a vote on that, that would not be unanimous, right? Paul Tully certainly believes that we should, you know, when we're just talking about the existing site, that it's worthwhile to tear down and start a new building. And that's appropriate as well. So, but if we just voted on that general statement, then this presentation to the town bodies, I think would jibe if it was approved. If we could have a second vote, if you wanted to, that says it is the sense of the building committee that a police department needs a robust training center, which includes a shooting range. We could have a separate vote on something like that as well, where that range is and how it's accomplished. You know, we could discuss in Q&A because there's a lot of options on the table there. Does that answer?
Hey, Bill.
Yes,
Bill, does this make it site specific? Right?
Shooting range.
No, not the range. No, I'm sorry. I didn't mean not the range, but the location of the facility.
We don't, you know, because we're only charged with that. We're really just charged with the current location. We're not voting on any anything else. I think that's inappropriate, since that wasn't our charge, and that's up for the town bodies to decide. So if I should, let me see.
But it would be sort of implied then that
it's implied, or I should probably be more specific about it and put it. It is the sense of the planning committee that the refurbishes new option of the existing police station, an excellent and optimal solution for the current site, right? Offers an excellent optimal solution for the current site. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
In providing a new home for the police department. Thank you.
In a timely fashion.
Okay. In a timely fashion, you're right, because that is a big part of the positives of a refurbished is new, in that it's probably the quickest, the solution that can be accomplished the quickest in a timely fashion. So let me read it one more time. because I know these guys, some of these guys have to get going here in a few minutes. It is the sense of the building committee that a refurbished new option of the existing police station offers an excellent and optimal solution for the current site in providing a new home for the police department in a timely fashion. There's just enough bad English in there to realize that I wrote it.
I just like to make sure I understand how everybody votes. Can we stop screen sharing?
Yeah, I'm trying to find it. It's not giving me, here it is. Stop screen share.
Great.
So that's I guess that's a motion on the floor. I'll read it one more time. It is the sense of the building committee that the refurbished new option of the existing police station offers an excellent and optimal solution for the current site and provided a new home for the police department in a timely fashion.
It's just not a new home, it's the same home. It's just not, it's the same home.
What is it?
I don't know, it'll be completely different.
They wouldn't recognize.
All right, but hey, Bill,
Yes, sir.
Paul, I think Paul Tully and I are going to vote the same way here.
Right.
And that we would like it known that we think that we should take a harder look at new construction.
Yep.
Okay. I agree that this building is inadequate and the facility, the training facility must be added, et cetera, et cetera.
Mhm.
But I don't want to vote against, I don't want it to seem as though the committee other members of the committee are voting against renovate as new, as, you know, when we really prefer a new building.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I
With
think
all,
that's right.
and that's a whole nother argument.
Right.
That I don't
And
want
I
to get
think-
into right now because of time
Right.
constraints.
Right, and Paul Tully's, view is that refurbishments, regardless of how, clean they may look going in, are always dirty coming out, and it's, just belief that we should just tear it down and not mess with the refurbishment, and that's good and appropriate because I think the town bodies deserve to know that good, thoughtful people with the town's best interest in heart looked at this for months, and there are a lot of good ideas out there, and there's a lot of ways that the town can go and deliver what it needs to do for the police department and the people. So that's fair and appropriate. Absolutely.
Okay, so if we can make one motion to renovate as new, and then one motion would be to have new construction, if that could be worked in.
I guess I'm confused. What do you mean?
Well, you're going to take a vote on renovate as new, and it's going to be something to 2, right? And
Yes.
then the next motion would be to have totally new construction, and that'd be 2 to whatever. I think that's the way that vote's going
Okay.
to work.
Okay.
All
Okay.
right.
So let's vote.
I just wanted Paul and I to go on record.
Yes, I appreciate that very much, and I agree. So
So it's going to be the second vote is new construction at the current site?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And I just want to, Leon, you had said at the town meeting that the, schematic design that we're working with here that Brian came up with meets, I think, 98% of your needs. I just want to confirm that with you.
Yeah, well, the design itself, yes, it needs to be refined. As we alluded to, we need to meet with Brian, and if he's the architect who does the project, to refine the needs and make sure that it's buttoned up. But it does meet the needs. I mean, obviously, cost benefit analysis would be a new building, would be a better long-term investment from that perspective.
Well, I didn't understand the last part. I just say on the cost benefit and what more you would be getting in the new building that
Yeah.
you wouldn't get in this design.
Well, this simply, it's a new building, like a new residence versus a renovated residence, is a better investment. It's going to last longer. It's going to be more efficient. This building is not built as a police building. It's built as a school that's retrofitted. So a police building somewhere that's built as a police building is better, my investment in my opinion.
Well, this is
Right.
In
definitely
terms of the
farming,
needs,
I'm just
in
gonna
terms
say.
of the needs assessment, you're getting 98% with the tweaks that you're going to do following up. You're getting 98% of the needs that the police department met with the current schematic, even though it's in a school building, original school building.
Yeah, it meets the needs, but I believe a better investment would be a new building.
Okay.
All right, so is there a second to my well-crafted motion?
Second.
Second, Penny. All those in favor? And Michael Chen and Mike Morrow are not available. I do not have Michael Chen's proxy. I don't have a proxy for either one. And all those against? Paul? And, and Paul Tully also against. All right. And then Paul, so to come up with a second motion, let me say this one, right? It is the sense of the building committee that a brand new building on the existing police station site offers an excellent and optimal solution for a new home for the police department. Is that?
Yeah, that's fine. Yep, that's great.
Okay. Yeah,
So-
you want to second that?
So
I
the
do.
only thing that I would say on that is I
Mhm.
think you obviously could have a new building on the site that would offer an excellent solution. I would not want to vote against that. My vote is because I think this renovate is new is the better option. So I don't really actually like that motion.
Mhm.
I agree with Penny. And also, I think,
I don't want to vote against that. If for some reason this town votes down the renovate as new concept, I would want to seriously consider the new building at the police department. So I don't want to be on record as being against that. I think that would be misinterpreted. Could we have the minutes, Paul? I mean, I understand how you and Paul, want to be on record here. Could we do something having the minutes reflect that, you're voting against this because you think a better option is to build a building as new on the current site?
Yeah, I don't.
Would that be?
I'm with
That's
Penny.
acceptable.
This will get misinterpreted if we vote on this way, because if the town wants to spend the extra $10 to $15 million to put on that site, I would not. I think that'd be fine. I don't think it's the best thing for the town. I don't want to vote against that idea.
Right.
So we need to be this got to be put in a different way. Why don't we just say the sense of the committee is, if the town chooses to do that, the committee would support it. And not as a vote, this is a sense of the committee.
Yeah.
Right.
And
And look, again, it goes back to what I saw in Darien and other places. These renovations don't always come out as planned. You end up having maintenance for the rest of the life of the building. And I'd rather start with something new. I don't buy the $10 to $15 million additional expense. So that's where I come out on this.
Yeah.
and I'm not against a new building.
Yeah.
But I just am thinking practically for the people in the town to get behind it. I think there's we saw what happened to the library in terms of, the building. And I think there is such sentiment about it. I don't necessarily agree with it, but I think the sentiment is so strong that I feel like the PD will never get a new building if or renovated or an appropriately strong working space if we move beyond that. That's I just think that the barriers from it will be so huge and it will be years. So it's like I completely understand that from a functioning standpoint, your new building probably better, but I don't think it'll ever get done. And
I think if we don't make a new building, we're going to be paying for it forever on this current building, forever.
And I think it's important that, on Monday, when the town bodies really, roll up their sleeves on this, that they understand both perspectives of the building committee. And I think that's very fair and appropriate.
That'd be great. Okay.
Do we agree that we shouldn't vote on this, but you can state that if the town chooses to spend the extra money, the building committee will support the town?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's fine.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that.
I think we're unanimous. Look, we're unanimous on doing something here.
Right.
yes.
We all agree on that.
Yes.
And even though we
Right.
take that, by the way, even though we take that for granted, that's not taken for granted necessarily in the community at large, only because they haven't been following all this. And so it is
That's right.
important that the community at large understands we are unanimous in the regard that we need a new police facility.
So Bill,
And it's going to
maybe
cost
that
us
could
a
be a-
fortune if we don't do something.
Mhm.
You know, just
Correct.
muddling around for a couple of years is
Is inappropriate. I
bad
agree with you.
idea.
Thank
So
you.
Bill, maybe you should make that a motion as well. Maybe that should be a motion of the committee, that it is a unanimous sentiment of the committee that a police building is needed within the town of New Canaan.
Well, that's our going in premise.
Mhm.
But
But it does,
there's no motion on that. It has,
Yeah,
I mean,
but no, it's not our unanimous opinion that we need a new building, because the committee thinks, many of the people in the committee think that a rehab would be the same, a renovate as new would be the same as a new building.
no, I'm just refining it a little bit, Bill. What I'm saying is that the committee should, your very first slide, Bill, is what I'm talking about. Jim, excuse me, your very first slide, Jim, is what I'm talking about. And maybe there ought to be a vote related to your very first slide.
I don't know if we need a vote. We could just change that first slide to state that the building committee unanimously agrees that the police department as is, you know, whatever it is. Well, you want to
Yeah,
put
that's
that
good.
in? I don't think,
it's-
putting it to a vote almost suggests that somebody could oppose it. I don't think any of us are opposing it. So I think I would just, Stuart, we could change the wording of that slide to be a little bit stronger.
Okay,
But it definitely, we should, as a building committee, be on the record up for
Mhm.
that, we've looked at it and we don't think that the current building suffices. And it
Right.
needs, it needs either new or renovate as new.
right. That's my point, is that we ought to be on record saying that. And your slide says it, Jim. That's all. I was just saying, do we want to make that a formal vote?
I don't think we need a vote, because I think we all agree.
But it might be worth stating it.
It wouldn't
when-
hurt to state it.
present.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Like,
We
because
could,
if
we
it's
should
long,
state it,
let's go.
stronger.
Okay, so that would be, it is the firm belief of the building committee that a new or refurbished is, or new,
Renovated or new building.
renovated or new building is greatly needed for the New Canaan Police Department.
I'd say it's required. I actually think it's required. I don't think it's I think we should use I actually wanted to change the word deserved, because I don't, that there's sort of a moral judgment there. I think
I
we should
agree with
just
that.
say it's requisite, required to, to have a appropriate police department.
Let's change deserves to needs and requires an updated facility.
Okay. And Amy, did I hear that you actually would prefer a vote on something like that? A vote on basically the conclusion line? It's the belief of the belief of the New Canaan of the building committee that the New Canaan Police Department needs and requires an updated, safe, and secure code compliant facility.
Yeah.
All right. Is there a
All right,
second? for
so
that?
moved.
All right. Penny moved. Second, Amy. All those in favor? And I will vote Paul Tully as my
Yeah.
president. Vote him for that as well.
Yep.
Okay. It's 10:49.
You know
I
what, Bill, in terms of, so Joe, in terms of how you do the minutes, why don't you have that vote first and then the
Right.
vote on the renovated new second? It sort of makes more sense for how the minutes go.
That's right.
Agree.
Thank you.
Could you update the slide? Can I trouble you to update the slide, Jim, and resend it? Because I think I'll just include those for the minute
I will
That-
update
with
that.
everyone.
And Joe, before we go, I think you probably have it. Could you send the link to the presentation that Brian did to the town bodies before, to our new town body members? And tell them that would be good to see before the before the meeting on Monday.
I will create a YouTube link.
Awesome.
If I'm the appropriate person to send it, but I'll gladly send it. Or should it come from someone on the committee? I'll draft it
I
up.
go ahead and say the committee has instructed you to send it. I just
Yeah.
thought that you might have it and you would have their new email addresses and everything.
So did we just address the building as opposed to the
We-
that we know we need to address the firing range requirements. We're just not 100% sure on that.
Right,
one.
we did not say anything about firing range. We did not vote on this, on that second, sentence after, the second thing I threw out there about the sensitivity committee, that the police department needs a robust training center, which includes a shooting range. We did not actually vote on that.
I think it's not appropriate that we should do that until the town comes to a conclusion with its negotiations with on the other situation.
But once again, I suggest that the committee, I think, is unified in suggesting that the police department needs access to a training facility,
Absolutely.
wherever it may be. But I think you guys need to vote that, in fact, you all agree that there's a need for a facility someplace, whether in town or shared.
Yeah,
Okay, fair enough.
yeah.
So you want to do that right now? So it is the sense of the building committee that the police department needs access to a robust training center, which includes a shooting range?
Either in New Canaan
Well,
or.
I don't want to suggest that. I think I would like to limit that to just the live fire facility. I don't want to suggest that we would take other things that are in this design out of it. You know, we right now we have, we have the video simulation room and the defensive tactics training. I don't want to make the motion so broad as to suggest that we would go other places for those items. So I would limit it to just the live fire.
Yeah, but the live fire is not what happens in that
Yeah,
facility.
it's more, right.
Not just, it is a training facility. It is not a shooting range. All right.
Why
It is
don't
a
we just
training
say-
center.
Okay,
Well,
okay, so
training
as long as, then
facility-
whatever the word is, I just didn't want it to, I didn't want it to encompass the things that were in the Renovate is New project, within the building. I didn't want to suggest that we would,
Right, I got
Say a
you.
training facility, including live fire.
Yeah,
capability.
that's fine.
There you go. Good, Jim.
Including live fire. So let me make sure I got this right. It is the sense of the building committee that the police department needs access to a robust training center. And then what did you say, Jim?
Training facility, which includes live fire training.
Maybe you want to say permanent access, right? Because, you could have lease it with somebody, but the idea is that we want to fix this deficiency in their access to training on a permanent
Yeah,
basis.
I think that's strengthens. I think that's strengthens it.
or you could say guaranteed access, whatever, permanent or guaranteed, whichever.
Okay.
It's getting too specific. Just say access
good.
or long-term access or something.
Yeah, long-term, that sounds good.
It is the sense of the building committee that the police department needs access to a robust training center.
Facility.
Needs guaranteed access to guaranteed access or whatever the word you choose.
There's long-term access, put that up front. Needs long-term access to a training facility, which includes live fire capability.
I like that.
I like that.
Joe,
Good.
tell me you got that.
Jim is our wordsmith.
Yep.
All right. We
I
good?
have a second for Jim's motion. Paul,
Second,
all those in favor?
second.
And Paul Pauly would vote in favor of that. We discussed the that as well.
He would vote, yeah, agreed.
Okay, it is 6 minutes before the 11th hour of the 11th day. Let this group and every other American remember the sacrifices the veterans make, and take a moment of silence in 6 minutes. So with that, do we have a motion to unanimous consent to adjourn?
So moved.
All right, thank you, guys.
Second,
Thank
Thank you.
thanks, bye.